So hello, welcome to our 14th monthly meeting of the UK MTB Trail Alliance. So in a minute, I'll talk you through the long-awaited survey results of our membership survey, which we did earlier in 2024, should we say, digging into the reality of trail associations, informal trail groups and bike parks in the UK, looking at the biggest issues they face, and what the UK MTB Trail Alliance priorities should be moving forward. So after covering off any specific questions you have about the survey results, we'll then move on to discussion of the issues raised by the results and whether the priorities that the survey identified for the UK MTB Trail Alliance still hold true, and if there's anything we're missing. At the end of the meeting, we'll then give you all a chance to share anything you need help or advice on and benefit from the group's experience. So I'm going to talk you through the UK MTB Trail Alliance membership survey. So we had 116 survey responses, but obviously not everyone had the option of answering or not answering each question as they came along. So, not all of those 116 respondents answered every single question, but yeah, not every question had 116 answers necessarily. But to give you guys some context to start off with, who are the Trail Alliance? So we asked people what type of group they were. And as you can see, things are fairly evenly split between informal trail groups, trail associations, bike parks, and then a small group of other that don't really fit any of those three descriptions. And then to break that down a bit more, informal trail groups obviously still in that big 27.5% group, but then trail associations, we can split them up between sort of constituted, unincorporated trail associations, either they just come together as a group and have a constitution, but they're not registered as anything more formal than that. But a proportion of them are registered as a community interest company, a CIC, and a larger proportion are registered as a charitable incorporated organisation, i.e. a registered charity. And again, for the bike parks, splitting that down, we've got about a third of the bike parks are non-profit and about 2/3 are for-profit. And then there's still that other group as well. So looking at where people are located, it splits down fairly well according to the population of the UK. Perhaps actually looking at it through that lens, with England underrepresented rather than overrepresented. But as you'd expect, based on the population of the UK, the majority of our groups are from England, but obviously large chunks from both Wales and Scotland, and then a smaller chunk from Northern Ireland. But we also have one that responded from the Isle of Man. And actually, in the larger group of people within the Alliance that didn't necessarily take the survey, we've also got a group from Guernsey as well. So yeah, we do, fairly representative of the whole of the UK, which is really good. Looking at how many people are in groups management teams, as you can see, there's a really wide spread there. And you see I've left a note to myself to pull out an average or mean, which I haven't done. But as you can see, there's a wide variety of different sizes of groups with different size management teams running them, including one with zero. I mean, I presume they were sort of anarchists and had no one organising them. But, quite a few with only one or two or three or four people, quite small groups, but then also quite large groups, including 1.8% with 16 or more. So yeah, and then we asked the question, how much funding has your group or bike park raised in the last 12 months? The vast majority of the groups have raised absolutely zero money at all. Zero money. There's really not much money out there for the vast majority of informal groups and trail associations. And even if you start looking in that second half where people have got some money, we're still talking very relatively low amounts in that third quadrant, somewhere between 500 to 2.5k. It's only really when you get that to that top left-hand corner that we're getting above 2.5k in a year. And as you can see, there is an outlier, which is Tile and Trails, who've raised over 1.2 million, which obviously is quite a lot of money compared to everyone else. If you look at where they got that from, well, obviously there's people that didn't raise any funding, didn't get it from anywhere. A sort of a split from raising it from their community and the public, from charging entry or membership fees to use the trails, raising it from brands or other commercial organisations, or from grant funding. My take out of this slide is there's surprisingly few accessing grant funding, despite there being grant funding available out there for people that are properly constituted at least. Just looking if people have got insurance, about a third don't, about a quarter have private dig day insurance, and then some are insured either through British Cycling or Cycling UK, although there's some debate about whether their two insurance policies cover people for dig days. And then obviously a lot of the bike parks and probably some trail associations have private full liability insurance as well. Just splitting that down by insurance provider, the insurance market for trail associations and bike parks seems to be dominated by two players. Zurich, obviously taking the lion's share of the private dig day insurance market, but then also a good third of the full liability insurance market. And then AIM, which is the Adventure Industries Mutual, I think AIM stands for, having again a third share of the sort of full liability marketplace and some of the dig day marketplace. And then Again, quite a few other insurers in the market, but actually none of them, having more than one or two groups between them. Really the market is dominated by those two main insurance players, which I think, in all honesty, presents quite a big risk for bike parks and trail associations, because if one or more of those two come out of the market, we could be in an awkward situation. So what about our trails? I hear you all ask. So, obvious question to ask is, how many trails does your group look after? And again, quite a wide spread. Some groups looking after 0 trails, a good quarter looking after somewhere between 1 and 4 trails, another quarter looking at somewhere between 6 and 10, another quarter again looking after somewhere between 11 and 20, and then again at the sort of top end, there's some outliers as well. It tends to be the Scottish trail associations that are looking after more trails. So in this case, it's Tayside Trail Association, a clear outlier with 520. I think part of that is historic reasons in the fact that obviously Dimbins was operating in Scotland, trying to encourage trail associations to form. And I think they did that through a lens of geographical efficiency, if you know what I mean. And I suppose looking at forming trail associations that covered a much wider area than perhaps trail associations that formed organically would normally. But if you look at people like the Tayside Trail Association, they've almost got 3 or 4 miniature trail associations inside them with separate volunteer dig crews looking after different areas within Tayside. But yeah, that gives you an idea of the sort of number of trails. But if we look at the approximate combined length for those trails, again, quite a wide spread. Again, with Tayside Trail Association being the clear outlier with over 500 kilometres of trails. But if you look at the total length of trails of all of our 116 survey respondents, we've got almost 6,500 kilometres of trails across the UK, which is over 160% more than the UK state forestry provision, making up 72% of the total. And I've got my fingers in the air with brackets for total there. So you can see, if you look at it compared to Forestry England with 1,300 kilometres of trails, NLW with 540, Forestry Land Scotland with 460, Forest Service Northern Ireland of 148. Really that's paled in comparison by the trails that informal trail groups, trail associations and bike parks manage between them. And obviously that's just the total of the 116 groups that responded to our survey. So we estimate that the actual kilometre of trails looked after by trail associations, informal trail groups and bike parks is probably over double that figure. Somewhere between 85 to 90% of the UK's trails are outside of the official forestry services provision and looked after by the sort of groups that are members of the UK MTB Trail Alliance. So looking at what sort of trails we look after, well, there's a quite a nice split there from XC trails, enduro downhill trails, trails with large jumps from mountain bikes, dirt jumps, skills areas, pump tracks. And then looking at, the spread of difficulty of trails, as you can see, there's quite a nice bell curve there, spread across the whole spectrum of provision. And it looks sort of as you would expect, really. Perhaps there's a slight overweighting for black trails, but some would argue perhaps not. But, you would expect that sort of bell curve of provision for different sorts of trails, which is great. And if we look at who's riding our members' trails, there's an interesting split here. So, mostly locals is less than a quarter of trails. The vast majority of trails are a mixture of locals and people travelling for more than 30 minutes. And there's a few trails, I imagine bike parks, but, possibly some other trails in remote areas, but that have got a good reputation with mostly, non-locals, i.e. people travelling for 30 minutes or more to ride those trails. Moving on to sort of land ownership issues. If we look at whose land people's trails are on, as you can see, a really wide spread there. But, there's no real majority there. We're still looking at sort of 27, 28% as the largest group. Obviously, lots of trails on the land of the big national forestry organisations, so Forestry England, NRW, Forestry Land Scotland, Forestry Service Northern Ireland, but also the Woodland Trust, the National Trust, the Ministry of Defence, the Crown Estate, and obviously, a proportion of people are leasing their land from either a public landowner or a private landowner. And let's not forget local councils, which are a really big group. And then look at the type of land. So any of your trails on protected land, i.e. on nature reserves, sites of special scientific interest, special protection areas, etc. So 3/4 no. So there's no real issue in terms of protected land there. About 10% aren't sure. There's obviously an education job to be done there. But more importantly, just over a quarter do have some of their trails on protected land. And if we break that down a bit, it's actually not too bad. So over half of those that do have trails on protected land, it's only between, it's less than a quarter of their trails that are on protected land, with three-quarters of their trails not on protected land. It's only about a third that they've got trails on protected lands. It's all of their trails. Looking at whether people's trails have permission to be on their land. So yes, the overwhelming answer is yes. So almost 60% do have formal permission to be on their land. Another 10 odd percent are currently negotiating permission. About 6% did have permission, but it's lapsed, but they're still sort of operating under those terms. About 12.5% have informal permission, which is both good and bad, and only 15% operating without any permission at all, i.e. a truly sort of wild trail type scenario. Looking at whether people needed to or do need to apply for planning permission for the trails from their local planning authority, it's a mixed picture here. So almost a third, yes, they did or do, but substantially over a third saying no, that they didn't, which sort of makes sense if they're on forestry land. But almost a third aren't sure, which again sort of points to a lack of sort of clarity and to a certain extent education. Then just look at what people have permission from their landowner to do. So there's a small group that sort of only have permission to do landowner supervised trail maintenance, i.e. they're sort of volunteer parties organised by the landowner themselves. But thankfully that's quite a small group. Over 75% have permission to do self-supervised trail maintenance. It goes down through trail inspections, hand build new features on existing trails, using vehicles to transport equipment and people materials, use of streamers, hand build new trails, using whacker plates, using power barrows, all the way down to using chainsaws to clear fallen trees, which actually I'm surprised that figure's as high as 25%. That probably is, there are bike park members that have leasehold arrangements with their landowners, and therefore they have permission to do whatever they want on those lands. And therefore, and as you can see, there is a slightly smaller group, above 20%, that have anything they want to do. So that still implies there are some groups that have permission to use chainsaws, even though they don't have a leasehold of the land. Looking at our shares, the area that the trails are in, 85 odd percent of trails are sharing the area that the trails are in with walkers. Obviously, runners are an almost equally a larger group. Horse riders are pretty prevalent as well. And then, as you can see, almost 30% of trails are having to deal with motocross bikes and Cirons in the area of their trail, which is a problem, as we'll come to later. And as you see, the graph does go on a bit. So surprisingly, almost 2% also share their land with people that pheasant shoot and skiers and snowboarders, which I imagined up in Scotland. So look at how people's relationship with those user groups. So ignoring illegal users like motocross bikes or Cirons, just the legitimate user groups. So overall, it's a pretty good picture. About a third say it's very good, just over a third say it's good, almost 25% is okay, and only 10% say they have difficult relationships with other user groups, which is a really, refreshing and good picture. And looking at the local community's attitude to trails, again, a really nice picture, just under a quarter saying it's very positive, half saying the local community's got a positive attitude to their trails, 25% saying an okay attitude, and only less than 5% reporting a negative attitude from the local community to their trails, which is great. Looking at people's relationship with their landowners and managers, again, a really good picture. 41% saying they've got a very good relationship with their landowner, almost 30% saying a good relationship, 10% saying okay. And it's really only when you get down to that sort of final 20% that people are saying it's either difficult, very difficult, which is about 10%, well, less than 10% in total, and then about another 10% saying they have no relationship at all with their landowner manager, which is probably bad, but I suppose in some ways you could say is good. So looking now at some of the issues that our people that responded to the survey are facing. So we asked people what is your group's biggest barrier to progress, and we gave them a free text field in which to write their answer. And as you might expect, we got 116 different answers. But to break that down, there were clear groupings of what people said. So one was a lack of volunteers, and as you can see, there's just some bullets point there that people saying that in slightly different ways. And again, there's a whole other slide full of slightly different ways to say that. There was also another group of comments focusing around lack of funding. So again, some different bullet points showing people saying that in different ways. And again, another slide of people saying that in different ways. And then a larger group, probably 2/5, citing landowner relations or issues around relationships with their landowner. So whether that's complaining about their landowner being risk averse, not being officially recognised, not having the dialogue in place, not having permission in place, a lack of interest from the landowner, bad relationships, bureaucracy, not being able to use the machinery they'd like to use. There's another slide of this here. So again, some stuff around local authorities and planning permission, inconsistency, agreements and reluctance to formally recognise things coming through as key themes. Again, there's a third slide here. Health and safety paranoia, withdrawing permission, changing access, and then obviously just sort of forestry operations as well, filling in forestry operations. So thankfully, we did ask people to rank the issues they faced. So we asked people what are the biggest issues your group are currently facing, and we give them we ask them to rate 29 potential issues from 1 to 5. And this became really clear. As the survey results were coming in, probably the first set of results, this was moving around a lot. But as we got up towards those 116 responses, there was very little movement in this table, which showed it was, it was not that close to the wrong thing. These were clearly the top 10 things that people were concerned about. So no surprises here. If you looked at the previous slides, lack of volunteers being the number 1 issue, lack of money being the number 2 issue, trails needing a lot of maintenance due to high traffic being the 3rd issue, frequent storm damage to trails being another issue. And obviously we asked this survey before the most recent storms, which caused a lot of damage at the end of last year. But obviously historically we've had things like Storm Arwen a few years ago. But storm damage to trails is a really big issue. Motorcyclist bikes and Surons causing damage and causing issues to trails. Again, not surprising looking at the previous slides. Littering coming up really highly. Surprisingly, your relationship with your landowner manager, despite the moaning on the previous slides, actually is only ranking 7th overall. So actually, I suppose by giving people a list of things to choose from and rank, actually it focused their minds a bit on what, perhaps some of these other issues above, which are bigger problems for them. In joint 8th place, we had lack of right knowledge and issues due to trails crossing or exiting onto paths or rights of way, public roads. And then 10, establishing a dialogue with the right person at your landowner or manager. Looking at priorities for the Alliance, we actually asked, this came earlier in the survey, but I thought this fitted better in the slides here, but we asked people if their group or their bike park was a member of any other organisation other than the UK MTB Trail Alliance. 3/4 aren't. They're not a member of any other organisation. Probably a fifth are a member of British Cycling. Just under 5% are a member of Cycling UK, and an even smaller amount are a member of both Cycling UK and British Cycling. We also asked them, how well do you feel each of the following properly represents the interests of trail associations? And as you might expect, none of these organisations scored particularly highly. In fact, most of them scored pretty poorly, with the notable exception, I suppose, of Scottish Cycling, which 12 years ago helped create Dimbins and developing mountain biking in Scotland, which sits within Scottish Cycling. So I think that's probably the main reason that Scottish Cycling is seen much more favourably than British Cycling or Welsh Cycling, although you have to say Welsh Cycling is doing better than the British Cycling. So we asked people if there was only one thing that they could ask the UK MTB Trail Alliance to focus on, what would it be? We gave them a free text field in which to write their answer, and we got 116 different answers. But again, there were some very clear groupings that came out of people's answers. A key theme being facilitation, to get everyone talking and sharing information, providing a library of useful documents, sharing best practice, having a forum, sharing information. Again, another slide of it here, helping each other to be successful, database of knowledge, standardising how we work, providing a general advice service, providing a store of knowledge. So that's a key theme that came out, facilitation. Another one was representation and advocacy. So here's some of the free text answers people gave. Policy changes at higher levels of councils, local authorities and government, getting recognised by leading landowners, government and other influencers, getting formally constituted and affiliated with INBA Europe, allowed a voice, dialogue with the Forest Service, advocacy work with landowners, communication with Forestry Commission in England. You get the general idea. So representation and advocacy, another key theme that came out. And I suppose as a corollary to that, negotiation. So working towards getting landowners to see unofficial trails as an asset, trying to find a third way with national landowners, dialogue with landowners to more joined up thinking when it comes to wild trails, helping volunteer trail associations becoming officially recognised, getting landowners to be more open to trails in their land, standardised guidance, and then also a smaller but still significant strand of promotion, so encouraging more people to volunteer and get involved, persuade the MTB industry to get involved in building, maintaining trails, encouraging more people to volunteer again, and pushing the whole mountain bike community to support their trail centres and bike parks. And then access again came through as a key theme. So basically, and access rights to bring us closer to the Scotland model, and also, fight for access, cycle rights on footpaths, again, as a smaller point there. So thankfully, again, we asked people to prioritise. So we gave people a list of 33 different potential projects and asked them to rank them from 1 to 5. Coming through at number 1 was working to persuade British Cycling and Cycling UK to focus more of their effort and spending on recreational mountain biking, the trails that we ride and the issues that we face. Number 2 was providing a library of useful documentation. Number 3 was advocacy work on access. Number 4 was advocacy work to persuade landowners to be more favourable towards mountain bike trails and mountain biking. Number 5 was a guide to different sources of funding available. Number 6 was a UK-wide campaign to raise awareness of the importance of riders giving back to the trails that they ride. Number 7 was working with landowners to standardise and improve the way they work with formal and informal trail associations and bike parks. Number 8 was working with landowners to clarify and improve their internal guidance on authorised trails. Number 9 was a study or a paper to show the economic, health and environmental benefits of mountain bike trails. And number 10 was trying to find a third way with national landowners between official trails and unauthorised trails, e.g. wild trails could be regularly inspected by volunteers, but with no official or group looking after them. So at this point, I thought it would be useful just to see how we were doing against those priorities. So we have been working over the last year to persuade British Cycling to focus more of their efforts, and Cycling UK to focus more of their effort spending on recreational mountain biking. I wouldn't say we've made much progress, but at least we've been trying. But we've made some progress, I think, which is why it's in a light green there. We have definitely provided a library of useful documentation. So it's not complete. So I've sort of given us a mid-green there. Again, we are really quite involved in trying to move the access reform agenda forward in both England and Wales. So we're a member of the Access for All Coalition, which is a coalition of over 50 different organisations, so including British Cycling and Cycling UK, but also the Ramblers, the Climbers, the Canoeists, and lots of other groups. And we've been trying to play as active role as possible in that and really trying to push forward some of the ideas we've had around landowner liability. It feels like there's some steady but slow progress being made there. Advocacy work to persuade landowners to be more favourable towards mountain bike trails. I've not put that in green, but we have been working on it, mostly through our involvement feeding into the UK Trails project. And obviously that's a strand of work that they're picking up and obviously very involved with the landowners themselves. So we're not claiming any credit for that, but there is work happening on that front. This is definitely a dark green here. We've definitely done this. There's a really comprehensive guide to the different sources of funding available for trail associations and bike parks and guidance on how to apply on the Trail Hub. We have been doing some work to raise awareness of the importance of riders giving back to the trails that they ride. Hopefully you guys will notice the coverage that we managed to persuade the various different publications to give to the damage that was caused to trails by Storm Bert and Storm Dara, and really trying to get the message across that people should be trying to give back and help out either through volunteering or donating. So I think that's an ongoing strand of work, and we'll have peaks and troughs based on newsworthy opportunities we have to get that message across. But whenever one does come up, we are trying to do it. We have been doing some work with landowners to try and standardise and improve their work with informal and formal trail associations and bike parks, mostly with Forestry England, through working with them on their new templates agreement that they want to roll out to all of the trail associations they have formal relationships with in England, but also through working with earlier in 2024 with some of the groups that were looking to form a relationship with NRW and looking at the NRW documentation there. So again, small amount of progress, positive progress, not overclaiming on that one, but we have moved forward slightly on that. So yeah, the next two, working with landowners to clarify and improve their internal guidance on authorised trails. To be honest, we haven't really had the opportunity to do that at all. And neither we have the opportunity to start looking at a study or a paper to show the economic or health environmental benefits of mountain bike trails. That would be a major piece of work, not just in volunteer time at our end, but also in financial commitment to get that done. So I think that's probably a way off, but we can discuss that later in the call. And again, trying to find a third way with national landowners between official trails and unauthorised trails. So we haven't, again, been able to do much proactive work on this ourselves, but we have fed into the work that the UK Trails Project is doing around this. It's not exactly framed in this way, but it definitely does fit in that bucket, some of the work that the UK Trails Project is doing. Just a couple more slides. We asked people to rate the importance to your group of the following ways of sharing knowledge. And as you can see, it was from 1 to 5, so nothing came through that strongly. The majority of people thought the knowledge sharing platform was a really important way of sharing knowledge. Again, a small majority thought a monthly email newsletter was an important way. Surprisingly, in third place was intergroup knowledge sharing. So I gave the example of shared dig days, but there are other ways that we could do that. And I think that's a strand we could pick up in 2025, actually probably led by some of you guys in terms of actually being proactive about working with other local groups and doing things like shared dig days or other events together to get the intergroup knowledge sharing going. Monthly Zoom calls, video meetings came through quite strongly, as did in-person regional meetings and conferences. And actually in last place, which surprised me, was the idea of an in-person UK-wide meeting or conference, which is one of the reasons we haven't prioritised that and are yet to organise one. We asked people if they had an opinion on how the UK MTB Trail Alliance should be constituted. About a third people didn't have an opinion. About a third said as long as it's a non-profit, they don't really care. And then about another third did have an opinion, and it was split between a CIC or a charity using this association model, with a smaller group looking at the foundation model. So you'll be pleased to know we are moving forward with registering as a charity as an association model. We should keep everyone happy. It's just taking a bit more time than we'd like. So I'm now going to stop sharing and see how many people are still here. God, there's quite a lot of you still here, which is good news. Hopefully I haven't bored you all to death with slideshare. Has anyone got any questions or comments on any of the slides before perhaps we widen the conversation out?
One comment around the studying and doing some research. We had quite a good relationship with Exeter University Mountain Bike Group, and I know some of those students were looking to do kind of research in this field as part of their PhDs. We kind of lost contact with them, but it might be worth possibly reaching out to university mountain bike groups and see if anyone, who's got a passion for that subject is already doing something along those lines. It could be something you could tie in with potentially.
Yeah, it sounds great. Well, if you can hook us up with anyone, that would be greatly appreciated.
Cool. Yeah, put the word out and see if there's still a group there.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite the data dump, so it's kind of hard to really form meaningful thoughts after having that much dropped on you. But kind of thing that comes to mind is like next steps with it. I mean, obviously with all this kind of data acquisition, whilst it's interesting in itself, it doesn't necessarily lead us to a direction, shall we say. And obviously there's a few of the sort of objectives there that you covered that we have been working towards. But is there plans to kind of redo this in the future to try and track trends, or is it just a basis for us to kind of, when we take on activities, to use as kind of evidential reasons for taking on those activities? I'm not advocating to do it again, by the way. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of work, and obviously it was a while ago now, but it was a lot of work to try and, getting a meaningful amount of people to respond. And I think we did quite well. 116, I think, is pretty impressive. And certainly I think gave us enough respondents to actually, for it to be meaningful and representative. We probably, if we look at who, percentage of people we hit, I'd say it's at least 50%, hence making that estimate about the total number of trails earlier. But it did take, a good few months of a lot of work on my part and pestering on my part to get people to complete the survey. So as you know, Tim is a board member of the UK MTB Trail Alliance, so he's asking this question deliberately because he knows the answer, I think. Yeah, we're committed to ourselves that we'll ask the survey at least every 2 years. Now, ideally, I think we do it every year, but I think realistically that's too much work. So I think, we'd be looking to do another survey either at the end of this year or in January next year. But I want to spend a lot more time and effort on survey design. One of the reasons it's taken me so long to present the results of this survey is that actually I designed a lot of the questions in a way that made it really hard to analyse the data, and it made it a really manual process for analysing the data, which is why it's sort of taken so long to pull out and present the data from this. But I think it's really valuable. We need to be asking people what issues they're facing and what they want the Trail Alliance to be doing about those issues on a regular basis. Whether we use exactly the same questions every 2 years or every years is a different question. I might want to ask some of the questions in a similar way so we can sort of compare things survey to survey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the ones that jumped out to me as being particularly pertinent to be done again would be, those that affect people's sort of lifestyles and things like that, as we sort of see potential sort of deteriorations in standards of living and things like that, I'd be curious to know what that does to people's willingness to volunteer for things, people having the time to spend their precious sort of free time doing, trail building in some woods they're not really supposed to be in and things like that. But I think 2 years is probably a decent window for it. I think doing it again any time sooner than that would be probably wouldn't yield that much more in terms of beneficial results for the amount of work it takes.
You never know. People might respond straight away next time round.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Does that answer all your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Anyone else?
I've got a quick question. You said that the Forestry England had 1,300 kilometres of trails. I thought it was 1,300 miles. So I don't know if that figure's correct or not. But
let me just check, because I've got it up on screen on another browser window. Hang on.
that's more like 2,000 kilometres rather than.
No, so well, to be honest, I had that figure anyway beforehand, which I'd found, I can't remember from where, maybe from their Strava group. But the UK Trails Project published numbers for all of the 4 national landmark owners' kilometres of trails in the UK Trails Project report, and it does say 1,300 kilometres in that report, which is open on screen in front of me. So the question mark actually over that is an interesting point, which I meant to mention as I was presenting those slides, was it's unclear if that 1,300 figure for Forestry England or the 540 kilometre figure for NRW, or the other 2 figures for Forestry Land Scotland and Forest of the Northern Ireland is a figure for waymarked trails or single track. So if you imagine yourself riding an old school trail centre trail like at Avan or Cody Brennan, as you well know, large parts of that marked mountain bike route are actually fire roads, and only sections of it are single track. So it's entirely possible that those kilometre figures for the national landowners actually include, probably half of it as forest roads that are part of waymarked trails, not actual single track. But I'm not entirely sure of that. I think that's certainly the case for NRW.
I say you're right, because certainly, for instance, at the Dolby, there are short sections of some quite long sections of fire road which are included in the red trail. So because they name each section, and every time you go onto a forest road, it's still got a section number.
Yeah.
So they will probably include that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose just for the sake of balance, our figures for the UK MTB Trail Alliance are completely self-reported and unaudited, and may not be 100% accurate, but I imagine they're fairly accurate. People do log their rides on Strava, so they probably have a fairly good idea of the number of kilometres of trails they're looking after as a group. Anyone else? Go on, Mike.
Just on that same figure, the 6,000 kilometres that you've reported from the associations, that could well include those forestry sections as well, because quite a few groups do maintain forestry trails as well, don't they?
Yes, there will be a small amount of crossover from groups like Jez and Singletraction and Andy and Dean Trail Volunteers, who are maintaining officially waymarked trails on behalf of national landowners. But actually that's, there's a small amount of crossover there. If you look at other groups like Ride Mendips, who are maintaining trails officially on Forestry England land, Ride Mendips trails aren't being counted by Forestry England as official trails. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure there's necessarily any more examples other than Dean Trail Volunteers and Singletraction. I'm sure there are, but it's not. It's an edge case rather than the majority, I think. Anyone else?
Robin, you mentioned that BC weren't being particularly helpful. Did you get any indication of what their reasons for pushback were? Why are they not interested in being positively engaged in getting more trails and more people mountain biking?
Sorry, who did you say, Malcolm?
British cycling.
Um,
Did you get any feedback from them as to why
yeah, they're not. It's not that they're
unhelpful?
not. It's not that they're not interested. I'd sort of ascribe it more to sort of organisational inertia, if that makes sense. You know, they're a very large ship that changes direction very slowly, and it's not because of either organisationally or individually, i.e., people working for British Cycling aren't interested. It's just that budgets are set a year and a half before they're spent. Team structures have evolved over tens of years, and budgets are allocated as a result. And yeah, I think they've just sort of, because there's been no one looking over their shoulder and reminding them about mountain biking and say, hey, don't forget about us here. We're over here. They've forgotten almost entirely about any recreational aspect of mountain biking. To be fair to them, they do try and bring new people into the sport through things like their breeze rides, and I forgot the name of their other types of rides, but there are a couple of sort of schemes they run to try and bring new people into cycling, and quite often it's mountain biking they're trying to bring people into. But after that, they almost forget completely about recreational mountain bikers, unless you start racing. And I can understand historic reasons for that. It's a problem across all cycling disciplines for them. I think they sort of don't really pay much attention to the recreational aspects of the sport, or necessarily organisationally feel that they need to. The issue we face is that funding bodies like Sport England, who provide them with 8 million plus in funding a year, probably should be wanting them to spend more time and effort on recreational cycling than they do. It's just historically those funding bodies haven't really been interested in that. They sort of had a more recent change around, but they're very interested in changing outcomes for sort of underrepresented groups and geographies, if that makes sense, rather than sort of recreational cycling as a whole.
It seems to me partly that BC has relied in the past their club structure on for recreational cycling, which is fine, road cycling, time trial, whatever, but there really isn't a club structure supporting recreational mountain biking. There is no club structure really. The majority of cycling clubs do not even have mountain bikers included. But that's what BC relies on for the recreational element of their work, if you like. They're really dependent on their club structure.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a big part of it. And there's no quick and easy solution to that. They're sort of, that's part of the problem, is that mountain biking is almost invisible to them because it isn't visible to them through their club, through the activities that they conduct, through the club activities and the racing activities. Do you see what I mean? And also, it is very hard to, other than pointing at a few top level stats, 5% of the English population has mountain biked in the last year, according to Sport England's Active Lives survey. It's very hard to sort of have an argument or construct an argument with evidence to say what sort of mountain biking those people are doing and why, therefore, British cycling should be paying attention to it. Do you see what I mean? It's all just sort of supposition and as far as they're concerned, hearsay. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I do understand.
But as I said, it's not, don't get me wrong, I'd like them to be moving faster. I don't want to make excuses for them, but I just want to be clear. It's not, it's an issue that any large organisation with inertia and budgets that are set well ahead of spend would face.
And does the same things apply to Cycling UK? Are they in the same category, or do you think they're doing a better job?
I should point out that I'm a trustee of Cycling UK at this stage.
Yeah, we know that.
So I'm sort of I need to be fairly neutral about what I'm saying, and obviously everything I've said up to this point has been with my UK MTB Trail Alliance hat on. No, I think they're doing a better job, and as you know, our survey results pointed out, they were perceived in a much better way than British Cycling was. I'd obviously like them to be doing more, and I think they could be doing more. But you know, they've got a lot to do as a charity, and are really quite laser focused on, you know, trying to get more people cycling as a whole through whatever way they cycle, whether that's commuting to work or gravel riding or mountain biking. You know, and that's really, that's really their focus. And I think they're, you know, when it comes to off-road cycling, whether that be mountain biking or gravel riding, their focus, as I think we would want it to be, is very much on opening up access. And hopefully we'll see them do some more work over that, as they have done historically. You know, it tends to go through peaks and troughs as opportunities arise. Hopefully we'll see them do some more good work on that moving forward.
Can I also ask about funding? What's you're creating a charity, or both association charity? What is your short, medium term thought on how that's going to be funded?
That is a good question, Malcolm. So as most of you know, we launched publicly in June. As part of that launch, we launched a crowdfunding campaign aiming to raise 10k to help cover our sort of year one costs. And we've fairly much achieved that. So we're up to about 9,820, I think was the last figure I sent around today. And so if any of you got any change burning holes in your pockets, you could help us get to that 10k point. But that's really there to sort of, you know, that money's aimed at, you know, really helping us as an organisation operate. So paying membership fees for lots of different bodies, which I could list off, but to give you some example, the Forest Industries Safety Accord, which we'll need to join if we want to influence health and safety policy regarding volunteers in forests for any of the 4 national forestry organisations. They follow the FISA guidance. Joining things like the Outdoor Industries Alliance, or things like the Visitor Safety Group. I mean, there's about 15 different organisations that we, you know, rather boringly need to become members of and start influencing policymakers through, all of which have fairly hefty membership fees, and also covering volunteers' expenses. Although to be clear, as well as giving my time away for free, I've not claimed any expenses up until this point. So that money is all sitting there in the bank really until we get to that 10k point and we start spending it. We're also, as some of you know, and I can't really say much more than this, is, you know, we've been successful. We'll announce soon a separate strand of fundraising, but that funding is aimed at, you know, not at us as an organisation, but to go back into the trails. So money that we'll bring in and push straight back out again without taking any of it, to really try and help trade associations, trail groups, and charity-run bike parks make a difference with them. And we've also got a few ideas about other sources of funding to cover off some other issues that are less well developed, but that I'm pretty confident about. 2025, though, I think, you know, we'll, and again, this is all subject to sort of discussion and agreement with our board, some of whom are on this call. But you know, at some point, we are going to need to sort of professionalise a bit, and you know, the next obvious step on that is bringing on staff. Now, I imagine we'll start off small and perhaps bringing someone on one day a week rather than hiring 5 people at once. But we'll be looking to fund that through various different means. We'll probably do a crowd fund once a year. Once we're registered as a charity, we'll be asking we'll be suggesting a membership fee to our members, although there'll be no compulsion for people to pay a membership fee for them to join, a bit like the Liberal Democrats. But there'll be a suggested fee based on trail associations and informal trail groups and bike parks income, a percentage of their income. But you know, again, there'll be no compulsion for them to pay it. It'll be totally if they feel we're delivering them the value, then they're free to offer it. So yeah, I think we're in I wouldn't say we're in a really good place, but I think we're in at this stage of our development as an organisation. I think we're in the right place. Do you see what I mean? We've got enough funds to achieve what we can realistically achieve at this stage of our development, and in future we'll need more money to achieve more because we'll be more mature then. But we don't need that money now. Do you see what I mean? We will definitely need it this year, though, at some point, Malcolm, just in case you find any underneath the sofa.
I have a look under the sofa when I finish the call. It's a challenge. At the end of the day, we have to find some money, right? Good work. Everybody's doing good work, but you need to find money to fund that, and continue funding it.
Yeah, but as I said, it's baby steps. So as I said, I don't want to overpromise, but we're talking about an amount similar to what we've raised in the crowdfund. Coming in from various sources for this new initiative, which will go back out to trails again. And that's gonna take up quite a lot of the volunteer time we have centrally to manage that. As I said, the next obvious step is having staff, but again, we'll need time to manage those staff properly and make sure they're working effectively. So again, I wouldn't want to start off on anything more than 1 day a week for argument's sake. Do you see what I mean? As we gradually mature and grow. Anyone else? Go on, Andy, you must have a question.
I'm trying to raise my hand. I think she made me co-host. I've lost it.
Is that your excuse?
Yeah. I was just, yeah. I think that point about the funding is interesting. I think what we've found is you've got to get really quite organised before you can go for funding. You need to have a really compelling story about how you're going to spend the money, the plan to have the spending of money, what impact it's going to have, what money you're putting in. Are you going to, it's, as you say, there's a lot of grant and funding sources out there, but it's not true. It's not just simply a case of going and asking for money. I expect that'll be the same for you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there will be opportunities that come up where there's grant funding available to achieve specific goals that we'll need to develop programs around to access that funding to deliver against those goals the funders have.
But it might be something for the Alliance to think about, is where you can bring together 3 or 4, a group of trail associations and get that funding on there, and by having that weight of numbers that you can go after different funding.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Hannah's got a hand up.
There. Hi. I wonder if you've thought about your interface with the Trail Pot, which is already constituted as a charity and therefore sort of set up to do fundraising. And its goal is to also distribute money, say, raised from the community to grassroots mountain biking. And it would be a shame to have duplication and potentially like water stuff down. So has the board thought about how maybe you could do the advocacy bit and they could do the boring fundraising, but you'd still get money from them? The trail associations would still get money from them, for example.
Yeah, I had a chat with Chris at Trail Pot just before Christmas and discussed a whole realm of possibilities. But I need to probably now have another call with him in January, and then whatever the outcome of that is, go back to my board with, I suppose. So yeah, I mean, I can't make any commitments, but we are having those conversations, I suppose, is the short answer.
I suppose the tricky thing is who decides.
What do you go on?
Who decides where the money goes? I don't know much about the Trail Fund, for example, but
they've got a board and a sort of funding formula proposal that is like biased towards the places that have raised the money. So the places that raise the most money would get a slightly greater proportion, but they're still looking at redistribution. I just thought, like, they're already set up as a charity and they're already set up with all the like payment funding things, so it might save a bunch of admin if you tap into their funding stream rather than set it all up again yourselves.
That makes sense.
I don't see why you couldn't be a beneficiary and all the trail associations wouldn't be a beneficiary of that, funding that and fundraising that they do. Like, it would seem like exactly the sort of thing that they're talking about supporting. If you look on their website, there's loads of like.
Yeah, I think there is a slight. I chatted to Chris about this obviously before Christmas. There's not an exact match. They have a wider remit. It's not just about trails for them. And they've. Yes, they're already constituted and they have a board of 2 trustees, but they've sort of they've approached things the other way around to us. Like we've got out and raised money, and both through the crowdfund and through the other side of things, which we're yet to announce. We're our backfilling with our charitable application process. And meanwhile, they've done things in reverse. They've successfully registered a charity, but yet to start those other activities. But yeah, I think there's definitely room for collaboration. And yeah, as I said, I talked to Chris before Christmas, but I can't speak for what the next conversation will bring. And it's not I'm only one part of that conversation. Do you know what I mean? Anyone else?
I don't know how to do the raised hand thing. I'm sorry.
That's all right, Will. Don't worry.
I've not figured it out yet. Just one thought, and you might have already had this. I might be telling you something you already very well know. Just trade associations around the UK seem to offer trade association deals, such as insurance. So they get a group insurance policy and then offer that to their members, which is how it comes with slightly better deal or benefits or something like that. And obviously they get a kickback, and that's how they fund their I almost said trail association, but that's how they fund their business association, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce or ACT, which a lot of bike people are a member of, and quite often they have a website and they have pertinent information for their members on the website, which then also gives them a forum to, say, have industry sponsors who might like to be seen to be helping. So, bike manufacturers, etc., where they place a bit of advertising on the association's website, saying, "Hey, use our pedals or whatever." But in effect, they're helping to fund that association. I've never seen a really nice, clear map of where you can go and ride your bike for different purposes in the UK, and that map is something in a way that you could probably draw. I don't mean easily, but you could probably draw that map with more information than anyone else at the moment. Some people wouldn't want to be on it. I'm sure that.
Well, yeah, that was you preempted what I was going to say.
Yeah.
A lot of people wouldn't want to be on it. That's the issue.
No, but quite a few people would, who are not necessarily on all the other maps and things. And again, that would drive traffic to a website portal, which again could could drive money to the association.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's quite a lot of people already trying to do that. So, some of whom we've already got good relationships with, like iBike Ride, but they're not the only ones. There's a good few, 4 or 5 different sites out there trying to tell people where all the trails are.
It's not like you want to be Pink Bike or something. It's that you want to, you're giving genuine advice and information for, you could say bike parks. Obviously, I'm a bike park, but it's wider than that. It's about going out and riding your bike recreationally, mountain biking. It's a slightly different take on things, almost a less commercial take on things in a way. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think your idea about looking for sponsorship for specific things is a really good idea. Whether that's areas of the trail hub or various other things like that.
I know trailers, and I almost said trail associations, but business associations seem to do all sorts of crazy deals on your phone line. I mean, I know I'm also a bike shop, so we get all that sort of stuff, and card machines, etc., etc. But this user group have specific needs, and might want to buy into that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely on the things that. I knew this. The point you made about insurance was probably the most important one from my perspective, because you're right. That's a real, as I talked about in the presentation, that's a real issue for people, and one that's sort of fraught with future risk, and one that it's an obvious model that both British Cycling and Cycling UK provide to their members, both as individuals but also groups. But yeah, I think when once we are properly constituted, and therefore a legal entity, we can start exploring those conversations with insurance brokers to see if that's a viable option. It's although it is a potential revenue opportunity, I'm not sure how much, if our primary objective is to try and drive down costs for our members, whether I want to be taking a cut, or that larger cut, and therefore B, if we're not taking that larger cut, it's not really much of a revenue opportunity for us. If you look at the total number of, the total number, the total amount of actually insurance premiums that people, that was the word I was searching for, would pay across all of our members, although it's a significant amount in, a small percentage of that wouldn't add up to much, and unfortunately probably doesn't add up to much for potential insurers either. So I'm not sure how realistic that is necessarily.
No.
Compare it to British Cycling or Cycling UK, they bundle all of their insurance requirements for their individual members and the different tierings of that, and therefore the different levels of insurance they provide, and their groups into one big pot. So they obviously have a lot more leverage and negotiating power than we would have.
Okay.
Apologies, just jumping in there. I was called away for a second, so I missed the first part of that chat. Talking about insurance, I'm assuming the suggestion there was something to do with trying to facilitate insurance for trail associations and things like that, and taking a cut. Was that the first part that I missed?
Not necessarily just that. It was just talking about funding in general.
And
I made the point that business associations throughout the UK. So I've been a builder. I have a bike shop and a bike park. The different business associations seem to fund themselves through offering a grouped and discounted services, such as insurance. It wasn't just that.
I think the only part I was sort of jumping in, again, it might have been covered in the bit I missed, but the more, if you wanted to consider something like that, the more lucrative would be individual insurance for riders.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, that's not necessarily the group that we're representing, but that doesn't mean necessarily we couldn't leverage our position to sort of that, because that's something which many people don't have and should have. As someone who runs a bike park and doesn't want any of my injured riders to be worrying about how they're going to pay for things going forward, it's something which I think is quite underserved in this country. I'm just tagging it on as a kind of potential, if we ever go down that road, there's a lot more people to sell individual insurance to than there is for trail associations, things like that. And I think it would be a real positive step forward for the trail associations if more people had their own insurance in case the worst happened. But anyway, so that was just, like I say, I'm going to have to actually drop off in a minute. So as I promised Robin, I've got to go and deal with something else. But anyway, just want to say thank you all for attending, and I will speak to you all soon.
Cheers, Tim.
Yeah, cheers, guys. Have a good one.
Anyone else? Right, well, I might just share my screen again, just on that slide of priorities. One second. So, I mean, looking at that list, does that obviously we did the survey a while ago now, and lots of things have happened in the industry. Both in our space. To name a few examples, it's become clear that NRW's budgets have been reduced drastically, and therefore there's some uncertainty around the level of funding for their official trails in Wales, at least. We've had both Storm Bert and then more significantly Storm Dara and the damage that caused. We've obviously had another year where the industry itself has suffered more still. I'm sure Malcolm could tell us more about that. So I suppose in light of that, do these still feel the right priorities for us? And obviously I can't see anyone's hand, so people should just shout.
Robin, Bern, can I come in here? I'm sort of wondering, could maybe increase the scope, include cycling in Ireland, and that,
Yeah. That was just an oversight that they weren't included. Anyone else? I suppose, but more importantly, it's less about what's on this list and the priorities of it. But is anything obvious missing? And I'll let whoever's about to speak then go ahead.
It's Mike here. The two items on advocacy work, I think, are very important, because that's the best way. One of the best ways we can grow is to have more access and more legitimate access to areas, even if it's just use of some of the footpaths and stuff, just to get people using mountain bikes a bit more.
Yeah. Anything else?
My thought, Robin, is that given the resources you have, that's quite a long list. So if you can prioritize that list even further down, you may well prove to be more successful. And you may decide that this is something we actually can't do right now. Like those things at the bottom, 8, 9, 10, which you're acknowledging and not being successful at. Maybe you just have to say, I'm not going to tackle that now.
Yeah. I mean, this doesn't represent the plan that we've been operating against as an organisation. But obviously that plan was put together based very much on this. And therefore looking at how we needed to set up and the sort of work streams we needed to achieve these sorts of goals. And a lot of that, as I talked about earlier, is about establishing ourselves, properly as a charity, not just so we can raise money, to Hannah's point, but, so we are taken seriously by the organisations that we need to influence, and those relationships will be built over a period of years, and change will happen over a period of years, not overnight in either case. So there's sort of a basic level of stuff we need to do in order to achieve these sorts of things. Advocate for some sort of political change requires us to be involved in lots of different Quango-like, organisations across the UK's 4 nations and at UK level. So quite often we're sort of killing more than one bird with one stone, but that bird dies very slowly. I'm not sure that's the best analogy, but you know what I mean. I'm going to take the slide off the screen for now. But yeah, nothing obvious missing then for anyone.
The only thing I would kind of like to see would be some sort of maybe annual conference get together and meeting, and something along the lines of like conference type activity where you could also invite some of those groups that we want to increase, we want to build capacity with, and we want to build better relations with. I know it would take a lot of organising and what have you, but it seems to me sometimes we're kind of very much a virtual organisation. But I don't know what others think.
Well, yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it's just, it's just time. It's not that I don't want to do it. It's just I don't have, we at UK MTB Trail Alliance level, with the current level of volunteer time, which, let's face it, is the vast majority of that time is mine, don't have time to do that. And and if you look back at the survey results, that was, out of the various different ways of sharing knowledge amongst our members, it's the one that ranked the least highly. It was the Trail Hub that came top, and then the email newsletter that came second, and both of which take up a considerable amount of my time just keeping those things going. So yeah, I mean, I think we hope to piggyback off other opportunities at other conferences. So reframing MTB being the obvious one, but to a certain extent, I think just through both sides being busy at the wrong times, we may have missed that opportunity, or as much of that opportunity as I'd hoped we'd have. But there may be still some opportunity to do something around a small thing around reframing MTB. Obviously other opportunities throughout the year, but I think we're a way off, unless someone steps forward to volunteer, a way off sort of organising a national conference of our own, a physical one at least. Hannah, you got your hand up?
Yeah, just kind of what you were just saying, actually. On the women's mountain biking, women in industry scene, what we've done is organised little meetups ourselves alongside Kendall Mountain Festival, or things that there's a bunch of us going to anyway, and that's been quite successful at making networking things without actually having to have somebody organise something. Just all agree on a pub or a bike ride together or whatever, and kind of do it informally, and that's worked quite well.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think that idea of a sort of regional hubs, I think we've talked about it before. That would make it more, make it easier for groups to start to come together. Yeah,
and I think last year I had the intention of doing some of that myself, at least at a local level. I was thinking more, obviously fairly local to me here in Bristol. So, as thinking about trying to hook you guys up, Andy, Dean Trail Volunteers with Ride Mendips, with the guys at Belmont, and Ride Bristol. But I just never found the time to organise that. And likewise, I was planning to do the same in South Wales and never found the time to organise that. So I think this year it's going to be more about asking you perhaps to do it for the South West, and asking someone else in South Wales to do it for South Wales.
Well, we are getting involved with reframing, so it's happening. It is happening.
Cool. Anyone else?
I was just going to say, Robin, the other thing that could be on the horizon is they are talking about doing a bit more of a conference in Wales, aren't they? Sort of. I know it's at very early stage, but that could be another opportunity to get everyone together.
Yeah, totally. Although I'm not sure, I haven't heard anything about it if there is, but I imagine they will be at some point. And likewise, there's someone talking about organising an England MTB conference, but next year, not this year. But again, I think they're at the very early stages of that. So there are opportunities, and there are opportunities around things like, you know, we could do something around the Malvern Hills Classic. We could do something around, you know, we could have done something around a Tweed Love event, although obviously we can't now. But, you know, there are various big events that at least a proportion of us will be going to that we could do stuff around. So I'm trying not to speak too loudly. I don't want to wake Jez up. There he is. Anyone else?
There's of course the D-Bins conference in November, right? Is that something that you would?
Yeah. I mean, we did
maybe consider putting a paper up for that.
Yeah, we definitely would. I mean, again,
asking them to give you a session.
Yes, yeah. Again, it was sort of lack of time this year that we didn't do that in terms of suggesting something to present, but we did. Quite a few of us did go. So myself and Ian and Manon from the UK MTB Trail Alliance board, we all went along. And I imagine we'll do the same this year. You know, it's a regular fixture. It's a well-established fixture. And again, around you know, the IMBA Europe conference, it's my intention to go to that again this year. I don't know if your plan is go, Andy. You're on mute,
Andy.
It's in the diary. I might just end up going to Spain.
In Spain.
You might just be in the area at the time, but not go to the conference.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant! Well, you come along the bar in the evening, maybe.
Regular question: do you have any expectations from IMBA? What do you want from IMBA? What would you like to see them do for you?
That is a good question. I mean, I'll give you a tactical answer rather than I think of a strategic answer. Hey. And the tactical answer is obviously they've announced their partnership with Shimano, and a large proportion, if not 100% of the money that Shimano is putting into trails in Europe is going to flow through IMBA Europe. So there's an obvious answer to that question. I'd like some money for us and, you know, more importantly for all of our members. But I think they're the fairly early stages of that, and it's not clear if that arrangement covers the UK or if it is 100% of what Shimano are putting into trails. And also what the total amount is. I mean, it might actually, once it's divided up amongst all of the different stakeholders in Europe, turn into actually quite a relatively small amount for any one individual.
And it's also over a long period of time, right? It's like a 10-year, a 10-year deal or something like that. Shimano.
Yeah, I mean, I did a calculation, and if you did it based on Shimano's, what the proportion of Shimano's revenue that was generated in Europe, and you use that to divide up their total global announced spend, divided it by 10, i.e. into a yearly amount rather than a 10-year amount, and then looked at the UK's share of that based on GDP across Europe. That was about 60 grand a year that was going to go into the UK. Now, obviously, we might get more than that because it might not go to the whole of Europe, and we might, you know, disproportionately deserve more of it because we spend more on bicycle components in the UK than perhaps people do elsewhere. Not, you know, over and above our share of GDP, but it's not, you know, it's not going to be transformational amounts for the UK as a whole. It might be transformational for any one organisation that gets that funding, perhaps. But so that's an obvious thing. But no, I think, you know, to be honest, even though we're not officially a member yet, I feel like we're getting a lot of value out of our relationship with IMBA Europe already, if you know what I mean. You know, have a very good relationship with their management team. You know, I'm in regular communication with them. You know, they allowed us to go to the last conference as a member, i.e. paying members' rates and attending the member sessions. So they've been very generous. And yeah, I feel like we're plugged in to the IMBA Europe network as much as we would be as a member. But, you know, who knows? As soon as we are constituted, we will become a member and we'll find out if we're getting anything more out of them, I suppose.
I think there's an opportunity for people like you to steer what you want out of them, if I'm honest. Because I mean, I am reasonably well connected to IMBA, and kind of sit in some of their discussions, and I'm not sure that they necessarily know what the members want. So I think if you have the opportunity to tell them what you want and what you need, you may be able to influence that more than you think.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you know, other than money and what they're already doing, i.e. the conference and other forms of knowledge sharing, you know, like the situation for us in England, although there are some, you know, and in Wales and in Scotland and in Northern Ireland, is, you know, there's differences between all four of those nations, but there's much more radical differences between the situations that trail associations and bike parks find themselves in other European countries, right? So there's, you know, there's obvious places to share knowledge in terms of, you know, trail building education and trail building certification. But Ian, who's on the call and on our board, is plugged into that process, aren't you? And do you want to talk about dirt briefly?
Yeah, so we attended the dirt session after the Scottish conference to do 3 days of training as tutors, and obviously with a view to rolling that out a little bit further than it has been so far up in Scotland. And we're just waiting to see what kind of what comes of that. But that was a really good network opportunity with a lot of obviously a lot of UK, well, a small group of UK attendees, but a lot of European attendees as well. So it was a really good chance to do a bit of knowledge sharing and a bit more outreach there. And like you said, Malcolm, just to explore the opportunities of that relationship with IMBA, and then looking at how we can tie that training in, because I sit on we also deliver courses for ATB, and so looking at how those two courses start to sit alongside each other and how we can potentially look at rolling that out wider and how that will work as a piece, because obviously the dirt project with Dim Bins Association was kind of set up to really help them get their trail associations up to speed with trail inspection and trail building, trail maintenance. And so it's just looking at how all of those little bits of the jigsaw there fit together as a bigger piece of work for this year.
But to use that as an example, Malcolm, you know, the dirt course was sort of developed at a European level without any real regard or knowledge of, understandably, of the UK specific situation. So in the UK, the landowners are very driven by compliance with the construction, design and management regulations, which are UK specific. You know, it's a piece of UK legislation that's not driven by European law, and also various different, you know, UK specific health and safety regulations, which again are driven by FISA, which I mentioned earlier in the call, which is the Forestry Industry Safety Accord, which is a UK organisation that all the forestry bodies are a member of. And again, if you look back to just the sort of the legal landscape that trail associations and trail groups operate with, it's very different in the rest of Europe with their very different legal systems and, you know, legal approaches to liability and landowners' responsibility, and, you know, the various different ways that public forestry or forestry as a whole is owned and managed. You know, there's definitely a lot. You know, I'm not saying there isn't knowledge to be shared, but, you know, I think it's much more relevant that we share knowledge and experience within the four countries of the UK, which have fairly common legal systems. Possibly Ireland, you know, the Republic of Ireland as well, whose legal system only deviated from ours for the last 100 years. You know, more so than France or Austria, which again have, you know, very different things. But there are certain things like trail building skills and, you know, trail building knowledge, which is universally applicable, I think.
Yeah. Robert, I come in. The only thing is, IMBA, the way it's structured, has a national representation from each of the countries, each of the European countries that are represented. There is no national membership body representing the UK, so there is an opportunity there. And
yeah, I think when that's what we would be applying for when we made our application. Whether that would be something they could agree to, bearing in mind the political context they operate within, is a different question, right? But we'll definitely be joining IMBA either as that national representative body or as, you an associate member as you guys at Grassroots already are, Bern.
Yeah. I will see. That's the way I kind of would see it, like to see it kind of structured. Like, at Grassroots, we're associate members of IMBA. We're just restricting ourselves to North of Ireland, and the UK Trail Association covering the whole of UK. Well, as membership of the UK Trail Association, it'd be a natural progression then of the UK as Trail Association was also the national the representative body for the whole of the UK on IMBA. As a fully a voting member of IMBA, then you'd get your voice heard and also be able to raise issues that are kind of relevant to everyone here.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I mean, that's what we'll be aiming for.
Then
Mike, you've had your hand up. Oh, go on, Bern.
Sorry. But then why not have that on the list? That's not on the list of priorities. Stick that down.
Well, yeah. I mean, remember, that's not our plan, Bern. That's what came out of the survey, and our members have asked us to focus on. Do you see what I mean? That's
all right.
Slightly different things. Go on, Mike. You've had your hand up for a while.
Really? No, I was going to add, IMBA Europe have been quite good for us in the old days. We used their Take Care of the Trails campaign quite a lot. For us, it was a good tool for recruitment because you get all the publicity, you get the big banners, and you can splash it around, and people come along and see what's going on. And we did get quite a few new volunteers. We're not members of IMBA Europe at all, but over the years they've helped us quite a lot. And I think it's a really good tool just to spread the word. And that, along with the education aspect, could actually improve the way we recruit and maintain volunteers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think. Well, no, I mean, as you said, it is a great campaign, and there's definitely, that, as you pointed out, there's lots of sort of materials that a trail association can take and use. And as in 2024, we did try and work with them and encourage our members to sort of take part in that campaign, and I imagine we'll do the same again this year. What that campaign hasn't got, though, which would be good if it did, is sort of cut through. To the mountain biking press and therefore to the mountain biking public in the UK. As you said, you probably generated those volunteers through them seeing the physical signs that you put up based on the assets that IMBA had given you, right?
Yeah, that and publicising it on social media, because they can see these great big. It's a European build campaign as far as they can see. The fact that it's 3 guys with 2 shovels is irrelevant until they get on site.
Yeah. Well, look, I will, if I forget, remind me nearer the time, because I should have you talk on whichever monthly call it is, at least for 10 minutes or so, about the benefits you got from that when we're trying to sell it to everyone else. Anyone else? Well, look, I'm really apologetic about the fact I just sort of bombarded you all with slides. But yeah, it was, as I said at some point, like I didn't design the survey in the best way that made it easy to analyze the data. So I've been procrastinating over presenting the results for quite a while. So I set myself this deadline and hit the deadline, but without much room to practice and polish. So my apologies, it was half an hour of slides, but hopefully you got something out of it. But yeah, thank you all very much. Mike's got his hand up.
Yeah, just a question on that. Are you going to put it up on the site and allow us to have a discussion?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as usual, I will put the recording of tonight's call up on the Trail Hub, and I will also link to the presentation as part of that, and we can have a conversation around it. I might take slightly longer doing that. It won't be up first thing tomorrow morning, but I'll do that over the next couple of days, and I might polish some of the slides as a result. But yeah, and actually, before we go, has anyone got anything else unrelated to what we talked about that they want to chat about? And it's a pity Kieran's not here. You could have picked up that conversation about YouTubers. Okay, cool. Well, look, as I said, thank you all so much for coming. My apologies for boring you all with by PowerPoint, and hopefully I'll see you all next month. Thanks very much.